Better Preach, Episode 50. When Jesus Leads the Way, Look Out, with Pablo. Welcome to Better Preach, a podcast for Catholic leaders on developing and delivering great Catholic talks. I'm your host, Ryan O'Hara, a 25-year vet of college and young adult ministry. Thanks for inviting me into your journey of communicating the true, the good, and the beautiful. What happens when you really stand back and allow Jesus to lead the way? Yes, in every aspect of your life, career, vocation, ministry, raising kids, whatever. But what if Catholic speakers with great talent, opportunity, and ambition don't follow that principle? I shudder to think. But then again, I just have to look at the example from my own life to know the results. Self-reliance is an idol that needs to be crushed in each of our lives as disciples, and certainly foremost for those who come to serve the Lord through teaching, speaking, and preaching. But I started off by asking, what if? What would it look like for a Catholic speaker to be dead serious about expecting, waiting, and trusting Jesus to take the lead? While no one does it perfectly, my guest today, Pablo, shares with great humility and profound trust in God her conviction of the need to step aside and allow Jesus, through speaking, teaching, and preaching, to bring the opportunities, bear the fruit, and get the glory. Pablo grew up in a devout, always supportive, boisterous Hispanic family in South Florida. She graduated from Franciscan University with a double major in theology and psychology. She also holds a Master of Theology from the Augustine Institute. She has worked in youth ministry for over 15 years and is currently serving parishes and universities across the country with the Evangelical Catholic. Madi is a presenter in numerous projects for Ascension Press and is well known for her dynamic presentations at the annual Steubenville Youth Conferences, NCYC, NET, Life Teen events, Focus conferences, diocesan events, and more. Madi has a deep love for food, but an even greater love for Christ and is dedicated to helping others encounter Him. If this podcast has been helpful to you, please let me know. Share a written review. You don't need a written rating, but a written review and a rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And I'd love to connect online at Instagram at Better Preach, all one word. But also I'd love for you to check out the YouTube channel. Each of these episodes for Better Preach is on YouTube. And I'm trying a different format with the video today with this episode. Love for you to check that out, youtube.com/@BetterPreach. There's the little @ sign right after the / @BetterPreach. Or you could just, Google it in YouTube, or you could YouTube it. And either way, just search for it, Better Preach Podcast, YouTube. It'll show up. Love to connect there too. Let's get into it. Pablo, welcome to the Better Preach Podcast. I am so glad that you're here today. Thanks for taking the time to connect.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
You're welcome. So you've been speaking to Catholic audiences for a number of years, but a year from now, you may be speaking to maybe one of the biggest Catholic audiences I've ever heard about. But you were chosen as one of the speakers for our upcoming National Eucharistic Congress in Indianapolis next summer. This time next year, it'll all be done. But
nice.
How did that unfold? Did you get a phone call from the Pope and he's like, hey, they've got this thing going on in the States. Would you mind, how does that all work? How do you get drawn into something like that? And are you told? Are you asked? What happens?
Yeah, I mean, obviously this has been extremely exciting. Eucharistic revival is something that we need. And I was super pumped to hear what's happening. And it's not just one event. It's a 3-year thing.
Right.
It's hitting up the diocese, hitting up the parishes. Let's be real. Some parishes and dioceses are doing it way better than others, but that's the point. But it's this beautiful thing of the whole country's coming together to really do this. And some of my friends, I had heard were kind of involved in some of the things. And I didn't really know much of the details. I was invited to help plan one of the portions with the youth section.
Sure.
But again, was a lot of questions were arising. And then I got an email, including a letter from the bishop asking if I could. I'm actually going to be emceeing one of the tracks because there's different tracks for the Eucharistic Congress. And so of course, I mean, they do ask you, but it's one of those things that you're like, how do you say no? You know, it's the Eucharist, it's the church, and we're all gathering together, and it's a pretty epic thing. And I have a massive devotion to the Eucharist, obviously, as Catholics, everyone should, but my conversion story happened in the presence of the Eucharist as I was staring down Jesus in the Eucharist. So I was extremely, extremely, extremely excited and just so grateful to be a part of it. So yeah, we're gearing up and getting ready. And I just got back from World Youth Day. I went to Santarém, where one of the Eucharistic miracles happened in Portugal. And that was wild. And it was there that I was literally staring at the blood and just being like, oh man, just praying for the church and the Eucharistic revival and just being so grateful that I get to, play a small role in it. So I'm very excited, long story short.
That is really exciting. And so you'll be leading one of the tracks. Could you give us a little more education around like what you know about the Congress and what it'll look like, and maybe a little bit more of what your role would be?
Yeah. So there's like the main one.
Yep.
The main thing that everyone's going to be gathered. Obviously, Indianapolis has a giant stadium.
Yeah, Lucas Oil Stadium.
Then, yeah, it's going to be massive. I'll be there in I'm hosting NCYC this year, so I'll be there in 3 months hosting NCYC as well. And then they have like a family track, they have a youth track, they have a ministry track, which is the one that I'll be emceeing. I'm missing one of them and I have to look up on the website. But they have different tracks for the daytime, and then we gather for the nighttime for the big, like, main keynotes. What I love about it is they're kind of covering all their bases. So whether you're young, you're old, whatever your vocation is, whatever your situation in ministry is, they have something for every single person. So I'm looking forward to it. And then some of the main track will be translated, so be available in Spanish and English, and some things are done in Spanish as well. Something that I'm asking a lot more when I go to places, like, oh, this is awesome. So you're going to be having translations, right? So to be able to see and make sure that that's available for our people.
What does it look like to prepare for it sounds like you're emceeing, but it's one thing to prepare for a talk. I've got 35 minutes and here's kind of the theme and we're driving at it. You're praying, you're preparing, but it's a different deal altogether to be an MC.
Mm-hmm.
Walk me into that a little bit, especially for something that's as large and diverse in terms of number and people. What does it look like to prepare to be an MC for a massive event like that?
Yeah, in many ways, it's way easier to just do a talk. Because for a talk, like you said, like you prepare your talk, you don't have to worry about anyone else. Like you should kind of know what goes before you and after you, but really you're focused on your talk and your time. You show up, you give your talk, you leave, you're having small talk, you're interacting with people, but that's it. As a host or MC, you're the one that has to interweave everything, which means you have to be paying attention to the talks because you want to comment on them. And then you have to somehow, say little things that are like announcements and make sure that those are done. And you want to share a little bit of your heart. And then you're always, timing. They'll be like, okay, 5 minutes. And you're like, okay, 5 minutes. It is a lot more prep for like ahead of time because you want to see the flow of things, understand the schedule, know your announcements so that you're not scrambling and, you want to look like you know what you're doing up there. So that's like prep ahead of time. But a lot of it's also there really paying attention to what's being said and done because someone may say I'm going to talk about this, but then they go a different route when they're actually there. So I think being host or MC, the main thing is you're on the whole time and you have to be paying attention and kind of also being open to the Holy Spirit of mention this or bring up this or stir up this, and your follow-up. It's a beautiful task to be able to prepare hearts to be receptive, to build relationship with the audience because you're there the whole time, and to be paying attention and to interweave.
Yeah, as I've observed this dynamic, I'm a football fan. I'll just use a silly kind of football analogy, but like I know that a lot of teams, they kind of script their first 10 plays or whatever. Like whatever happens in the game doesn't matter. Here are the first 10 offensive plays we're going to do. Then after that, it kind of depends on how the game is moving, and they make adjustments. I almost wonder if it's a similar kind of thing. You might know the first couple of times that you're going to speak, you have some kind of thoughts about how do we launch into this thing. But then it sounds like you can't script your final closing remarks really until you've gone through it. So that's a lot of hard work. Do you enjoy that piece of it? If you're going to compare like emceeing versus giving a talk.
Oh man, I love them. I love giving talks. I love them both. They're so different. I don't know if you can even compare them. Like they're so different. But I was a campus minister for many years, and so pretty much I was MC for every single retreat. So I think that prepped me a lot, and it is cool. God has given me gifts, and I recognize that it's totally from the Lord, that I can interweave things. And I remember recently this summer, in the middle of a talk, the lights went off and it was not planned. It was not planned. And I repeat, it was not planned. And middle of the talk, and I somehow connected it with like how God wants to come into like the lights. No, I'm sorry, the lights came on, not went off. They came on.
Sure.
And I interwove it with like God wants to enter into our darkness and come with his light. And people thought it was planned. And I remember being like, wow, Lord, you're like, that's pretty much what a host does. They have to be quick on their feet. They have to interweave things and understand. So it's fun. It's definitely something that I enjoy.
Well, you've been at this for a number of years. You didn't start off as the MC of large national Catholic events.
Nope.
What was your first talk like?
My first talk. Okay, so a little bit of background because it's going to sound weird. So first of all, my first talk, I was 11 years old.
Of course. That's
I was
awesome.
very tall. People don't know this. I'm very tall. Let's say it right now, because people see me in person. They're like, whoa, I'm 5'10". So very tall person. So I didn't look like I was 11. I gave a talk at like a youth retreat.
Yeah.
My parents are preachers. I grew up in a nonprofit charismatic organization called La Comunidad Siervo de Cristo Vivo in Dominican Republic. Our founder of our community, Padre Emiliano Tardif, is on his way to becoming a saint. So I grew up going to like conferences with 10,000 people, and it would be my dad and the priest, Padre Emiliano, and they'd be like, there's someone here that's blind, and then like now you can see, and they would see. There's people in wheelchairs, and now they can get up and start walking, and they would get up and start walking. So I was a preacher's kid, which has good and negative things, and that would be, well, we could do a whole nother episode on that. But it was a really beautiful thing to like be around that. So I had my first retreat. I was 10 years old. And so 11 years old, they were like, this is our Father Ingrid Pablo's daughter. Let's put her to speak. So my first talk, I remember it was, I think, 8 minutes long. I think it was supposed to be 20 something. It was 8 minutes long. I was super nervous, and it was about something about the Bible, like how to like, it was like one of those practical ones. Yeah. And I remember, being profusely almost ill. I was so nervous because I was talking to a bunch of older kids. And and that was like my first talk ever. It got way better after that, but my first talk was a doozy. I was also 11.
So it was supposed to be 20 minutes. It ended up 8. So how do you think it went?
Oh, I thought it was horrible. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I remember that being like, that was rough.
So with that experience, how did that set you up for talk number 2 or talk number 3? Like, how did things continue to progress? And you're like, I never want to do that again? Or
no, I continued in the community and got better and, got older. I also, my whole childhood was spent in a hospital. So I had been going through a lot of things. I almost died when I was 9. So a lot of life experiences. So they taught me how to give testimonies and how to share that actually I think was a better route for me. Like, just share your story, and then let's add content, and then let's make connections. And I think I was, I had a reversion and got really into my faith when I was in college at 19, but in high school I was kind of doing like the hypocritical, like, yeah, I love Jesus, but I also love other things. So it was an area that, like, I think I was traveling and giving talks my junior year of high school, like to Texas and stuff like that. And so it was something that I kind of started off in this community. And that helped with a lot of like the getting rid of my nerves and making myself feel confident, because by the time that I was in college, I had already given so many talks. And I had specifically done, we have a retreat called Felipe. And I had given that, I'd probably given that same exact retreat over 40 something times in my life
Oh
at
my
this point.
gosh, yeah.
So I've
Yeah.
really mastered those talks, you know? So yeah, it's quite the journey.
That's beautiful. What an incredible gift. To start at such a young age, but it sounds like you were really immersed in a really active and powerful teaching and speaking and preaching environment.
Yeah.
And that's actually quite different. I mean, most of the stories you hear of Catholic speakers, they grew up not in that environment and maybe had a conversion in high school or maybe college and then just started seeing it. But you probably don't remember a time in your life where that wasn't a part of your life.
Yeah, no, I don't. I remember a time in my life when it was like my parents' faith and not my own.
Right.
I do remember that, but I was always there.
What
I'm very grateful for that.
you mentioned adoration. How did that all unfold? That reversion, that kind of turning point for you?
Yeah. So first childhood surgeries, 13-year surgeries. That was kind of my first encounter with the
Wow.
Lord of like, I want to believe in the Lord. Because when my mother had to say bye to me, I mean, I was like 7 years old when all the surgeries started. Well, actually, I was 2, but then the really bad one, I was 7. So that helped me really get into my faith. And then high school was hypocritical, lukewarm for a while. But then I served at a camp in Georgia and was fighting with Jesus, and in confession had an experience where I said my sins and the priest questioned me and he asked me why I commit the sins that I commit, which I responded to, why do you care? And then had like kind of like a moment of like, man, these things are impacting me and I'm fighting with Jesus. And it was in the presence of the Eucharist. We had to give our life to the Lord. Everyone's crying and I'm, judging everyone around me. And finally got to the point that I was just staring at Jesus in the Eucharist and I was like, Jesus, I think we're good. Like, I don't need to give you everything, right? Like, I think I love you and you love me and we're good, and then I just felt the priest said the words, stop fighting and surrender. And I realized that I was just really clinching and kind of to my own plan and my own will. And a little part of me, like my sister had left the faith. And I was scared of like giving God my all and then failing and then leaving him, because then I thought it was a real failure. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah.
it's like the kid that says like, oh, I don't want to study, because if you really study and then you fail, you feel like a total failure. But if you say that you
that
didn't
makes sense.
study and you fail, like, why didn't try? Right.
Yeah.
So that was what I was doing with Jesus. And then finally kind of decided to go completely all in and just gave everything, changed my life completely around, came back home. And I mean, I broke up with my boyfriend, changed my friends, switched schools, changed careers. It was like went all in. And that was like the beginning of, all right, Jesus, let's do this. So Eucharist, baby. It's all about the Lord,
It is. And speaking of that, tell me a little bit about the overlap of your spiritual life, your relationship with Jesus, your relationship with Jesus in the Eucharist, and this call to speak, teach, preach. What's the connection? How does that all work? You have a personal relationship with God, but you also have this public facing ministry. How do the two overlap or not in your life?
Yeah. I think sometimes it's hard. I remember when I was like teaching and getting my master's and speaking, and I was talking about Jesus all day, and then I was going home and reading about Jesus all day, and then on the weekends I was speaking about Jesus all day. And the one thing I wasn't doing is praying to Jesus, because I thought that those things covered it.
Yeah.
And it was not good. Your spiritual life, I've learned this.
Describe like what wasn't good. What were you seeing?
I mean, me, like I wasn't good.
Yeah.
Like I felt distorted and extremely stressed and like not well. I'm I mentioned this earlier, like I'm a very real person. I remember having to give a talk after my friend died of cancer, and I was pissed. Like I was
Mm,
sad and I was hurt, and I had multiple friends die of cancer, and after two of them, I literally had to give a talk within days of their death, and I was like
yeah.
angry with the Lord. I don't know how to not be honest
Yeah.
in a talk, so I literally remember being on stage and saying like, I don't want to be here right now. I'm really upset with Jesus, and I don't want to be up here. And kind of talking about like my frustrations and different
Mm,
situations. And so kind of recognizing like my spiritual life and where I am with the Lord is going to impact speaking and preaching. And one, like, that's okay. Like, I don't, and I say this, I'm very upfront again, like, if anyone thinks that speakers have it together, like, we definitely don't. At least I'll speak for myself. I don't have it all together. Like,
mhm,
I'm a work in progress, and, I'm still dealing with things, and I'm still going to counseling, and there's a lot of things in my heart that the
mm,
Lord's doing. And that's beautiful and that's okay. I think for a little bit, I thought that I had to have it all together, and that was very stressful. But
yeah.
recognizing, okay, Lord, like I'm just going to focus on you, and we're going to pray, and I'm going to make time for you, and I'm going to be open to what you want to tell me, and we're going to be good. And in the process, if you, Lord, if you are the one that wants to work through me and give me these, like, speak and see all these beautiful things. I laugh with Jesus. I often tell him that I think I'm speaking and he has me traveling, speaking and giving my story and doing whatever for my own salvation, because he knows I'm stubborn, and the only way that I listen to him sometimes is through my own words. Like
Yeah.
it's funny, but I swear I think he's onto something. So I mean,
Yeah, I
of
see that.
course the spiritual life is going to impact my preaching and speaking, and it should. Like
Mhm,
it should, because I never want any talk to just be like, "Oh, I have it memorized and I'm done and I'm just gonna go up there and give it." And it's just the canned talk that I do. Like, I never want that. Like, people ask me like, "What's your go-to talk?" I'm like, "I could tell you topics that I'm like passionate about, but I don't want to have like a cookie cutter same exact talk." But the Lord is always doing stuff, and so the way that we present things should always be a little bit different. Not
yes.
saying that I don't repeat things, because obviously I do, but the spiritual life should be impacting us in a way that things should speak differently to our own hearts and to others.
So when you noticed that you were learning about Jesus, you were talking about Jesus, but you weren't praying to Jesus, what what shifted? What did you begin to do differently?
Well, first I went to a not good place. I got kind of dark for a little bit. It was also after one of my friends died of cancer.
Yeah.
It was not, I was in a not good place. So, um after I ignored Jesus for a bit and then realized this was a really bad idea. So, um, fell to my knees, had a massive breakdown, and um, really recognized like I need to really live what I'm saying and live what I'm preaching.
Having been in ministry for the last couple of decades, I started to feel at times like a professional Christian.
Mm,
Like just am I a Christian? I don't know. I'm a professional Christian. I sort of get paid to do Christian things and lead Christian things, but
mm,
that doesn't make me a disciple.
mm,
That was a hard lesson to learn. I think in some ways you were confronting kind of similar realities. Just because I'm kind of adjacent to all of this Catholic stuff isn't my relationship with God. It's a part
mhm,
of it.
mhm.
Um, and then at times it
Yeah.
starts to feel like, oh, well, how do I add one more thing now into a very demanding schedule and a demanding life? And
If I'm going to adoration to prep for a talk, that
mhm,
doesn't count for my own personal prayer time.
right, it's not a substitute.
And that's the thing.
Hmm.
Lessons learned.
Thanks for being so honest and vulnerable around that. I
Oh
appreciate
yeah.
that. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your process when you are writing a talk. What does your process look like to go from idea to holding the mic?
The process has changed throughout the years for sure. When in the beginning, like I would write it out and I would like look at it and I had my points. Like it kind of, as the years progress, you get more comfortable and, yeah. So now my process is I get a topic. I'll ask, okay, like, what are some main points for the topic? Some people, it totally depends on the diocese and the church that you're working with. Cause some people are like, here it is, have fun. And you're like, all right, cool. I like to have some guidelines. So maybe like at least give me a couple of points. Do you have a scriptural basis that you already want me to use, or do I choose that? And I do like to know what the overall vision for the retreat or conference is. And I like to know the talks that go before me and after me. So just give me a flow, and then I'll think about it. And then I'll probably just think in my head for a little bit and not write anything down. And then I like to journal. Journaling is my best friend. So I'll journal and I'll just write like random points that come to mind down, and I'll just write it all out, or I'll type it all out. I'm an extrovert. This is important. So I think better processing out loud. So I'll either process it with my best friend, who's also a speaker, so it works out real nice. It's very nice when we do that. And second thing, I'll overview it, kind of figure out a general outline, and then I will take out my voice memo on my phone.
Right.
This is where it's at. So if you go to my voice memo on my phone, you will see all my talks.
I love it.
Because I'm an external processor, I will just start my talk. And not finalize, but just like general, I'll start my talk. And then as I'm talking it out, I always do it in front of a mirror so I can see my own facial expressions. And then I will just process the whole thing. And then sometimes I'll make notes for myself and be like, go back, that wasn't good, change this up, or, oh, maybe add this. And then as I'm speaking and processing out loud, stories are coming to mind, analogies are coming to mind, metaphors are coming to mind. And so then I'll stop, play it back, reorder the outline, and then, are you ready? This is where it gets like, this is high key professional status.
Let's go.
Here,
yes,
right?
I'm feeling that.
So then I'll grab a piece of paper, literally either from my journal, so like this, or my go-to personally is a computer paper, and you fold it in half. Okay.
Okay, I love it. Yeah, go for it.
Very professional.
Yes.
And then I literally just write main points on this little piece of paper. It has to fit in this folded side.
Okay.
Very little words. Very little words. And if it's sometimes, ideally, like if you want to go high key, I'll have different colors for different points. And then that's it. So when I go on stage, the only thing that I have, and then of course, like I'll get to the point that I practice the whole thing and make sure it runs well, and I'll record it again. But when I get on stage, the only thing I have is my Bible and my folded piece of paper. And honestly, I rarely ever even look at the piece of paper. It's just there as like a cushion.
Sure.
And then I never look at it again.
So that piece, does it go in the trash?
After I give my talk, yeah.
Yeah. So you had some things you were writing down or typing up. It ends up on maybe multiple voice memos. Do you hold on to all of those?
I have a lot of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
There. Yeah.
I feel like
I title them.
I feel like, would you share one of those with us?
Oh, God,
like a little
no.
behind the scenes. Would that be awesome or terrible? I don't know.
Horrible, because it's like, the way that I give them, they're just so bad. But literally, like, they're just all there. Like,
I'm so intrigued. I use voice memos similarly, but not for entire talks. I work out like ideas just because oftentimes as I'm driving, the only thing I think as I drive. And so I was like, I'll sort of grab, I can't type, or so I just hit the voice memo and just start talking to it. I'm intrigued by that part of the process. Do you go through the whole talk, however long that is? So these are like super long voice memos, or just kind of parts of it?
It depends. Like, okay, one, is it a topic that I'm really comfortable with? Because there are certain topics that I feel very comfortable with that I could probably like start a talk right now because I feel really comfortable with it. Is it one that I don't feel comfortable with that I have to like really, if it's one that I don't feel very comfortable with, or if it's in Spanish, like Those take me a little bit more to prep. For those, I'll listen to the whole thing at least once and just take notes. But I won't, or like as I'm getting ready and doing my makeup, I'll just be listening to myself to go over my point with myself.
When you're doing it, do you get fully into it like you would on stage, or is it a little more muted?
It's a little more muted.
Yeah. That's interesting. So you've actually, as you're sort of prepping for actually giving a talk, you listen to it.
I listen to myself. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. I've never heard anybody doing that.
Oh,
That's a first. Yeah. Yeah.
cool.
People
That's
using
right.
voice memos for different reasons, but like never as something that is a really key part of the whole process. That's
Oh,
cool.
yeah.
I
Like
love
right now,
that.
I'm filming for Ascension next week. So I have 4 scripts that I have to like go through. And I would need to, especially there because it's 8 minutes. So I have to keep it on time. So I'll have multiple voice memos for those. Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you probably need a lot of space on your phone.
Actually, glad you mentioned that. Yeah, I'm officially at capacity.
I would think these end up being giant files. Yeah. I love it. That's hilarious.
So bad.
You know, you do a lot on stages, but then also like with Ascension, you're doing a lot on camera. What's the difference between what's the difference between talking to a live audience and talking to a camera? And how do you bring the same kind of authenticity, confidence, vulnerability to a blinking red light?
Yeah. One, I've been praying about this a lot. Like the beauty of when you recognize what your gifts are and you use them.
Mm-hmm.
And when you use your gifts and you know they come from the Lord, like you become fully alive. And I have noticed that this year. Like, you know, like before speaking at Seek this year, I almost threw up. I was so nervous, like it was one of the largest crowds I've done. I would think it was for the women's session. And but the second I got on stage, I felt like I was in my living room and I just felt so overjoyed and so at peace and so alive. So one, like recognizing, man, this is all Jesus. This is totally the Lord. And that gives me a lot of peace. When it comes to like camera or not camera, it's easier a little bit, right? When you're like with people because you feed off of their energy and you see their facial expressions, etc. When I started working for Ascension, probably like 6 years ago, I don't know, it's been a while. Oh my gosh, I think it's been more. I think it's been like close to 10. Wow. Okay, sorry. A while ago.
Yeah. You've been
at first
at it.
it was hard, because it's like you're like not only you staring at a camera, but you have all these like people around you that are staring at you and you have to,
and you're not looking at them.
You're not looking at them. It's weird. It takes a second,
Yeah.
But I remember praying one of my first times. I said, Lord, let me see the eyes and hearts of the people that will be watching this through the lens of the camera.
Yeah.
And man, like that has really done it. It's beautiful. It's totally the Lord. Like I look at the camera, but I'm picturing hearts and like people in different situations and interceding for different situations. And some people will already be coming to mind, and I'll be like, I want to pray for anyone that's struggling with XYZ or, if you really are understanding, sometimes it's like really hard topics,
Yeah.
I love it. It's totally beautiful. And yeah, so camera or people, they're still people.
Yes.
It's one of them just like people in front of you and one of them's people in the future. And I think when I was at World Youth Day, I had someone come up to me from like that lives in Germany. And she was thanking me for one of my videos. And I was, I'm sorry, what? Like, why do you know me? But that's the beauty of these videos that they, like, people always rag on like, oh, social media, whatever. It could be used for really beautiful things.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
Yeah. So love both of them.
If you could only do one or the other for the rest of your life.
Do that.
Well, you got, this is what we're doing. You just have
Vito. No, I'm not doing it.
You can't? Okay.
I think people, I would pick people. Because I love interacting with people.
You could reach millions more.
Yeah, but
right?
it's yes, but I love, one of my favorite things about speaking is actually after or before, when I get to pray with people and talk to them and hear their stories and like see their faces, and I love that.
Is there one moment that kind of sticks out as a favorite experience that you've had on stages or on screen or whatever.
I think it happened last week. I think it's because it's so fresh.
Yeah, share about it.
World Youth Day was just incredible. I mean, being around so many Catholics and just seeing it right in front of your face, having the Pope right in front of you. So long story short, I had like a secret list, which isn't so secret anymore because pretty much almost everything on my list is done, which is crazy. But when I first got into speaking, first of all, God had to make it very clear. I told Jesus, if you want me to be a speaker, I felt in my heart at a conference, like, I want you up there speaking. And I said, Lord, if you want me up there speaking, like, I will do nothing and you will do everything because I want to make sure it's you and not me. So I'm not going to say I'm a speaker. I'm not going to do a website. I'm not going to do anything. Like, you will do everything. And he did. Like, he was very creative, and it's very clear that it came from the Lord. When all that happened, I had like a secret list. Number one on my secret list of things I want to do as a speaker is like, this would be wild, was go to World Youth Day and speak at a World Youth Day event. That was like number one on my list. And, it was coming close. And I was like, listen, Jesus, I'm going to do my part. My calendar gets, very packed very fast. I was like, I'm going to do my part and I'm just going to have the days open. And you're going to do your part. And if you World Youth Day, Lord, you're just going to make it happen. Right. So it was a month before World Youth Day. And I was like, I give up. Like, it's not happening. It's okay. Maybe you'll take me to the next one, wherever it is. Right. And mutual, a friend of mine, Joe Melendrez, he gave me a call and he's like, hey, are you available to go to World Youth Day? And I said, I'm sorry, what? And he's like, Shalom World. I didn't even really know who Shalom TV is, but they're looking for a reporter/host. Like, would you want to do it? And I was just like, it was my Jesus year, which is a whole nother conversation.
Okay.
But 33, I went all out. I was praying for 33 minutes a day. I had a giant Jesus party where everyone came dressed like biblical characters from the New Testament.
Good for you. You went all in on that.
We walked on water. I had like a list of things to do.
Whoa. How'd you walk on?
We had different levels, like paddle boarding or like a piece of wood, or it was a lot. So
that's fun.
I had a backdrop of Jerusalem. It was ridiculous. So it was like towards the end, I was like, okay, Lord, like, okay, I guess I'm going to do it. So I said yes. And then Life Teen, I had my bigger conversion through Life Teen. And Randy Rouse is a friend. And I was serving at a Steubenville conference. And he's like, wait, you're going to be at World Youth Day? And I was like, yeah. He's like, can you do a talk for us? Like, Life Teen is actually now in Spanish in Spain. And they're gathering almost 3,000 teenagers in a field. And we're doing an XLT, like adoration, praise, and worship. Can you be the talk? And I was just like, yes, like I will happily do that. So long story short, here I am. You should know that when I served for Life Teen 15 years ago, this is the anniversary of my deeper conversion this summer, 15 years. I was the only Hispanic. There's so many resources in English that aren't available in Spanish.
Right.
And I had such a desire to get more stuff in Spanish and to see Life Teen in Spanish. And so here I am in Portugal in this giant field, listening to over 2,000 youth praising the Lord in Spanish in the presence of adoration. I had just given my talk. I had given my testimony of how I encountered the Lord. And I looked out in this field, and in the beginning of my talk, I mentioned that I'm Dominican. I'm very proud of my roots. I'm Dominican and Palestinian. And this guy stood up and held my flag, and I got emotional seeing my flag. Like, I don't know. I had a moment during adoration that I looked out, listening to everyone praising, and I just broke down in tears because all the prayers and desires and hopes that I've talked and joked with the Lord about, and it all came to fruition, like right before my eyes. Like, I got to speak in Spanish. I remember someone praying over me when I was at Franciscan and saying, like, I see you speaking to the thousands. And I laughed at their face and I was like, yeah, whatever. Like, this person's whack, right? And the Lord was doing it. So I've spoken at different events and everything has been so beautiful. Last week, like World Youth Day, was a big one for me. Yeah,
I love hearing that story and love its rootedness in your major conversion back to Christ, but also the dreams of a heart and seeing something that isn't, but trusting and following the Lord to see it come to life. I love that. That happened for you just this last week. What an incredible gift. Thank you, Lord, for that.
Yes.
Amen.
Amen. He's so good. God's so good. I love that guy.
Why don't we trust him? I mean, seriously, I'm talking to myself right now.
Let's say it. There's a bunch of times that he, takes a while to answer, but it's so beautiful.
It is. It is. Yeah. And he loves us when we trust him and when we don't. And he's so faithful. Such a powerful, real testimony to God's faithfulness, and just he will lead the way. He will open the doors, and he'll make things possible that seem impossible. But he also inspires us with real things, with real visions, even yourself seeing something that wasn't, and now years later is. And praise the Lord for that. How could people get connected with you online?
Yeah, so you can go to my website. It's just maripablo.com. And you could also Instagram, maripablo25, Facebook,
sweet,
maripablo, all the things.
Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for jumping on here today, bringing your whole self to this conversation. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Ryan, for all you're doing.
If this podcast has been helpful to you, please share a written review and rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And a big shout out to my podcast production partner, David Vessel. Thanks for making this look and sound so good. And to all of you, you have millions of choices when you podcast. Thanks for pressing play today. See you next time.